Okay, and welcome back, amazing students, and thank you for joining me for our lecture this week. I am excited to discuss individuals with disabilities. I'm going to be giving you some terminology to consider that is alternative to how we've currently described working with or serving or really being a good ally, right, to individuals with disabilities. Particularly what this lesson is going to do, if you recall back to our lesson on prejudice and discrimination and bullying, I also mentioned some of those dominant groups that are out there. And when we discriminate against individuals based on differences in their cognitive or physical abilities, we refer to that as ableism, right? So what we're going to be doing is this lesson will be discussing individuals with disabilities, but what it's going to do is really address how do we combat ableism? How do we combat ableism not only personally but also professionally? If you are considering a career in the helping professions, then one of the things that I truly hope you do is leave with some tools, okay, to consider in how to effectively combat ableism for today's lecture. So we will go ahead in the next slide, dive into the content. I hope you find it interesting. We're going to do some fun activities, and you will hear from some amazing guest speakers. When discussing any topic, as always, and you've come to expect from me, is that we always dive a little bit into the terminology of our topic for that lecture in order to better understand some of the jargon associated with that particular topic. So this week's no different. What we're going to do is we're going to consider the definition of ableism first, right? Ableism are those prejudice thoughts and discriminatory actions. Look at that language. Hey, we're using it again, right? Prejudice and discrimination based on differences in physical, mental, and or emotional ability. So usually that of able-bodied, minded persons against people with illnesses, disabilities, or less developed skills or talents. Now, for this particular lecture, I would like us to consider a newer term, a term that's used in one of the two TED Talks that you're about to watch related to ableism, and that is diversability. Diversability rather than disability. I love this term, diversability, used in a very powerful way to describe rather than a disability, rather than coming from a deficit-based mindset that because something is different, that it's less than. Maybe it's just different because it's different. And yes, maybe there are some things that I can't do the same as an able-bodied individual, but that doesn't mean that I nor society is less than as a result of those differences. And so diversability comes to mind. I'm going to show two TED Talks, and I'm hoping you find these TED Talks enjoyable. I really loved each of these, both from young individuals who are sharing their testimony as it pertains to their diversability. One in particular from Natty, who is going to share her experiences of being a college student on a campus with a diverse ability, and another from a Paralympic medalist, Dylan, who's going to explain his personal feelings related to his diverse ability. And so what we'll do is go ahead and move forward in each of these talks. And at the end of the talks, I'll share some very brief points with you. And feel free to listen and process the testimony of each of these amazing individuals. Also, please note the strength, the perseverance, and the determination, right, in each of these particular individuals. Inspirational, I truly believe. I hope you enjoy the content. Okay, I hope you found Natty's story absolutely inspirational. I truly loved this TED Talk because I believe it speaks so openly and candidly to the challenges related directly to prejudice and discrimination in reference to diverse abilities that can influence an individual throughout their lifespan. And so consider that Natty is young in age, wise beyond her years in terms of experience and life experiences that she's been faced with, unfortunately, right? At the hands of discrimination and prejudice. But Natty really touched on a few important topics. One, the term diversability, right? She uses this term to describe that because I am different in my mobility, that doesn't make me less than. But she talks about a very powerful notion to this of what prejudice, discrimination can do when we judge an individual based off of their physical ability and we treat them differently, we discriminate against them as a result, intentionally or not, right? Some of this was intentional, people assuming and saying mean hearted and spirited things to her. The other thing, though, is that remember we talked about privilege and we said something that when we are privileged, we don't see it as a problem at all because it's not a problem for us. And remember, I asked you to consider what life was like navigating our own campus, right? If you were having similar mobility needs to Natty, okay, in regards to her diverse ability, what would that be like, right? And so it's important to consider that all of these factors have an influence on an individual's physical health, their academic performance, and also their mental health and well being. All right. So, again, a very powerful story. After this, I'd like for you to go ahead and move on and hear the story from Dylan in regards to his testimony and his diverse ability.
It was September of 2011 when I sat in the yellow room with walls full of college brochures and flyers. I sat in front of the computer while staff helped other students in other parts of the room. I began to fill out the UC application and referred to a thick binder I had in front of me. It had my transcripts, volunteer hours, awards, and test scores. As I filled everything out, I began to check all of the boxes that pertained to me and my identities. While scrolling, I checked the box for first generation Chicano Latino, woman, and my socioeconomic status. One thing I noticed though is that my ability status wasn't asked in that category. I started thinking about how schools would find out about my disability. They had to find out somehow. I need resources and guidance. I worried about how I would navigate campus and live on my own. My diverse ability, a term used to embrace talents and abilities rather than to highlight inabilities, was not recognized as a form of identity, mainly because people simply view it as an unfortunate situation that people go through. Although my other identities were accounted for because of the boxes that I checked, I realized my other identity as a person with a diverse ability was being ignored. It was in this moment when I realized that not all intersectionalities are being accounted for, and in doing so, we prevent certain people from thriving. To me, intersectionality boils down to acknowledging all of the identities that make up a person together rather than independently. Because of my identity as a diversible person was not being accounted for, I had a lot of worries of what my life was going to look like for the next 4 years. Now, I'm not ignoring my other identities. I do identify as a first-generation, low-income Latina woman with a diverse ability. Today, though, I'd like to share with you my journey at UCI through my diverse ability and how much it has taught me about the importance of acknowledging intersectionalities. My first year was a roller coaster of emotions. I feared not having what it takes to graduate from UCI because of my background as a low-income Latina, but nevertheless, I tried to make the best of it. I was also excited about starting my life. This excitement quickly turned into fear when I realized that I was having a hard time navigating through campus. I had a hard time carrying my tray with food at Commons, our dining hall, and the excruciating pain I felt on my back when I did laundry made me want to drop out. The worst was when I would trip on cracks on the floors, especially walking uphill, and the pain I felt on my knee every time I would reopen the wound, it really made me want to drop out. Until that point, my disability had never gotten in the way of anything that I wanted to accomplish. I never thought I'd even make it into a UC, and now my standing was being jeopardized because of my diverse ability. It wasn't until the organization that I'm a member of back home called Kid City Hope Place, which has nothing to do with helping people with diverse abilities, was able to outreach to their networks and found a power scooter that a family was willing to donate. This was the year I began advocating for the diversable community, thanks to the help of upperclassmen mentors. It was because of them that I realized the power of student voices, and I ended that year in hopeful terms of what the future could bring. Now, despite the challenges I faced my first year, my second year has actually been the worst year of my undergraduate career. School at that point was very demanding, and I didn't realize I was experiencing mental health problems until much later in the year. I was on academic probation, and my living conditions were a challenge. I hated my daily commute on my scooter to campus, which was approximately 1.5 miles, but when it was cold and raining, that's when the struggle was real. Unfortunately, I couldn't ride the shuttles because of the inaccessibility with their ramps and the size of my power scooter being too big. It's through these struggles that I became more aware of ableism, which is the way society is structured to favor able-bodied people, therefore excluding those with diverse abilities. Not only is it reflected in our physical environment, but also in our interactions with those with diverse abilities. It's reflective in the way people interact towards me. I had people joke around and ask me for a ride on my scooter while commuting home, and it's remarks like these that affected my whole week. I had a very hard time pulling through that year. Before my third year even started, I had doubts of returning to UCI since I wasn't having a favorable experience. I had a hard time finding affordable and accessible housing, and when I was given my apartment, it had a 6-inch front door step, basically served as a wall for a wheelchair. Regardless of that, I made it work and I returned. The first week, while at an event at our gym, I had the pleasant experience of hearing a girl riding the elevator with me as she questioned the existence of an elevator at the gym, since, in her words, the point of the gym was to work out and take the stairs, and I guess if you can't take the stairs, you don't have the ability to work out. She said this all while she was inside of the elevator, while watching me in there with my crutch. At that point, I wondered what helped me decide to return. And I realized it was the community that I had here. It was with their help that I began to see changes on campus. Together, we worked on the Bus Love referendum that has increased the cart services offered by the Disability Services Center. I've also been invited to give workshops on ableism all throughout campus. I even auditioned to give a TEDx UC Irvine talk, and we all know how that turned out. I still have some time here though, and I know I can do more for the diversable community. The strength I had to push through with everything I experienced, I owe it all to my parents, who struggled to get me where I am. In 5th grade, I remember my mom struggling to help me with my homework. If she couldn't help me with my 5th grade homework, there was no way she'd be able to help me with college preparation. She would go around the whole neighborhood looking for people to help me with my math homework. Even though she was unable to help me, that did not mean she didn't support me. My parents' support is what got me through accepting myself and pushing forward with my education. Support that I often failed to see elsewhere. When I was younger, I also remember her pushing my wheelchair down the street while taking my brother in a baby backpack to take the public bus every other day, just so we could make it to physical therapy appointments. Had she not done that, I would have remained wheelchair bound. Despite the inner city struggles we were victims of, the lack of resources they were unaware of, and their foreign concept of higher education, The acceptance, hard work, and tenacity my parents showed is what pushed me to continue through this very day. Living with a diverse ability has come with its fair share of challenges, and the fact that I'm a first-generation low-income Latina also play a role in the experiences and struggles I've gone throughout my life. These experiences and struggles are not unique to who I am, but also prevalent in the lives of people with diverse abilities and intersectionalities. This is why we as a society should recognize that all intersectionality should be accounted for, and not one more so than the other. I know at this point, perhaps some of you may be feeling sorry for me and the struggles that I've endured, but feeling sorry won't solve these issues. Awareness and advocacy are the key. From being considerate of push buttons on the doors, saving seats in the edge of class for people with diverse abilities, or, if you want to go bigger, bringing awareness campaigns to your campuses or workforce in order to create more inclusive spaces. Before I leave UCI, I hope to continue bringing enough awareness about this to show that we need to increase the number of people with diverse abilities in higher education, and take into consideration of how intersectionalities affect the members in our communities. 1 year ago, I was on the brink of dropping out with the frustrations, helplessness, and loneliness that I felt through ableism. Now, I stand before you, or in this case, sit before you, stronger than ever before, with the hopes of paving the bumps and the cracks on the floors to provide a smoother ride for future generations. Thank you.
Okay, another amazing individual, truly inspirational, that I think really communicates in such a heartfelt, humorous, writing, charismatic way what it means to truly combat ableism on a daily basis. One of the things that I love and wanted to highlight regarding Dylan's testimony here is that he focuses on something very important. Two things: education and representation. Education, and if you notice, a two-pronged approach, not only to individuals who are considered able-bodied is the general term for that, individuals without a diverse ability, but also considers educating individuals with diverse abilities in order to build that sense of self-esteem, right, of self-belonging, of self-efficacy, to hopefully rise above the maltreatment and persecution of individuals with diverse abilities. But second, what Dylan calls for us to do is to have equal representation, right? And we've talked about this notion of representation in other aspects of our course. We've talked about when we discussed gender expansive models and sexual orientation, right? We talked about what it must be like to consider that if you are of the LGBTQ plus community and you're looking at advertisements and romantic comedies and movies and magazines and all of these things, that rarely is there something geared towards individuals who seek intimacy with the same gender, right? And so this is another notion of that, is how often do we see individuals with disabilities actually played by individuals with disabilities represented in mainstream society. You know, there was a movie not too long ago, I'm not sure if you've heard of it or have watched it, Peanut Butter Falcon, which is an amazing film. I'd highly recommend that you check that out, that addresses Dylan's point in a very amazing way. I don't want to spoil it for you, so if you have a chance to check out that movie, check it out. But what I would say is we could all take a note, right, from Dylan's lesson regarding education and representation. So in the next couple of slides, I'm going to share some statistics related to individuals with diverse abilities, which will set the stage for part 2 of this lecture, where we will close this topic out.
this right here is a photo of me when I was 14 years old. Now, I know what you're thinking. Dylan, mate, are you sure that's not Ryan Gosling? But unfortunately, no, this is a photo of me. Now, for a long time, I tried to delete this photo from my memory. And to be honest, do you blame me? Firstly, what the hell's going on with my hair there? I remember my mum's a hairdresser and I used to sit in the front seat of her car with a tub of gel and a hairbrush. And on the way to school every day, I would sit there thinking, Dylan, you have absolutely nailed it. I still don't understand why she let me leave the car. Also, secondly, where the hell are my eyebrows? Now, unfortunately for me, I didn't grow any eyebrows till I was 17 years old. Now, I understand that I had completely no control over that, but as you could imagine, it wasn't really helping my cause, was it? I also had braces. I also had my bed in the pantry, and I was a little bit on the overweight side. And this was really the first time in my life that I was really struggling with my disability. Up until this age, I'd never really cared about the fact that I was in a wheelchair. Everybody was young, nobody really noticed it, and everything just went along pretty smoothly. But at this stage, things started to change. People started going to house parties. Boys started kissing girls. Girls started kissing boys. Girls started kissing girls. And occasionally, boys started kissing boys. But absolutely nobody was kissing Dylan, I can tell you that much. And it was also about the first time that I really thought about myself as being weird because I had a disability. And to be honest, that really sucked. And it had a big effect on absolutely everything that I did. I started having a crap time at school. It really started affecting my sporting career as well. And for the first time in my life, I was really, really down on myself. And then the next year, in year 9, something happened. A mate of mine was having a house party. Now, this was a good mate of mine, a really good mate of mine. And previously, I'd never really been invited to that many house parties. And I thought, what a perfect opportunity to go to your first one. I'm absolutely going to kill it, and everybody will invite me to all the parties coming up ever since. Now, the invites for the party came out, and what do you reckon happened? I didn't get one. I didn't get an invite. And I remember thinking to myself, that is bullshit. Like, I'm actually really good friends with this guy. Like, how could I not be invited to his party? Anyway, I was sitting at home the day of the party, and I went to myself, I just really, really want to go. Now, back in the day, when you were 15, 16, it was super uncool and lame to text a person to ask if you can come to the party. The far more badass thing to do was simply turn up and jump the fence. Now, as you could imagine, jumping, it's not really my forte. And unless I had some kind of crane or like trampoline device, there was no way in hell that I was getting over that fence. So the only way to get in was to knock on the door and go through the front. Anyway, I sat at home and I'm like, you know what, stuff it. I'm going to go, see what happens. I got to the front door, I knocked on the door, and my mate answered. And he had this really weird, shocked look on his face, like I was there. I remember thinking to myself, like, what have I done? Like, why didn't I sit at home and play Nintendo 64 like I did every other Saturday night? Anyway, he looked at me and he said, Dill, mate, I'm so glad that you came. I just didn't know if you could get in my house because I had a couple of stairs, so I didn't invite you. I remember thinking to myself, is that it? Is that genuinely the only reason that I wasn't invited? So anyway, I went in that house party, absolutely crushed it, had an awesome time. And then I remember the next day I woke up and I was really bloody mad at myself. I was really mad at myself that I let my insecurities and my embarrassment about my disability dictate the previous year of my life. I was really mad at myself that I believed this thing, this negative stigma that having a disability makes you weird and makes you different, and that's the only reason that people don't want to hang out with you. I'm really mad at myself that I didn't just grow a set of balls and have some confidence and talk to my friends and educate them about my disability. Now, the only reason I wasn't invited on that night wasn't because they didn't like me, but it was because I didn't tell them about my disability and that I didn't tell them that I could get up the stairs and it'd all be fine. I sat at home for a whole year thinking these people didn't like me, but the only reason that they did is because they weren't that uneducated about disability, and I didn't really do anything to educate them on it. So after that night, things really changed for me. Started being more social. I started getting a lot fitter. I started going out a lot more, and I even started kissing the odd girl or two. And then after that night, I made a pact with myself. I made a pact with myself to never, ever let my disability get in the way of what I wanted to do. I made a pact with myself to not be scared of my disability, but to be rather embrace it in everything that I did. And because of that, I've been able to live a truly, incredibly awesome life. In 2008, I was lucky enough to win a gold medal at the Paralympic Games playing basketball for Australia, wheelchair basketball, believe it or not. Now, this was incredible for me. Ever since I was a kid, I wanted to go to the Paralympic Games. And the Paralympics, for anybody that doesn't know, is the pinnacle of elite sport for people with disabilities. But there's actually, a lot of people don't know the true meaning of the word Paralympic. The word's actually split in two. The Olympic part, which represents the Olympics, the pinnacle of sport, and the para part. Now, there's a common misconception that the para part actually means paraplegic or paralysed, but this isn't the case. The para actually represents parallel, meaning the Paralympics runs parallel or alongside the Olympics. Same gold medals, same venues, same elite athletes, same time. The only difference is obviously we all have disabilities at the Paralympics. Now, this was awesome in Beijing for me. I was 17 years old at the time, so I was actually still doing my HSC or my VCE while I was over there. And to be 17 years old and sit on top of the podium with 12 of your best mates, guys that had lost limbs to cancer, other guys that had horrific accidents on their work sites and were lifted up in wheelchairs, other guys that had car crashes and never be able to walk again and lost loved ones in the process. To sit on top of that podium and so proud of what we had done, singing that national anthem with tears in our eyes, it was the best thing that's ever happened to me. It really was incredible, and it's something that I'll cherish forever. I've also got a bit of a name for myself as the dude that crowd surfs in his wheelchair at festivals. Now, I've been very lucky to travel around the world, attending a bunch of different music festivals, and everybody knows me as, oh man, you're that guy that crowd surfs in his wheelchair. Now, to be honest, the first time that I ever did this was completely out of necessity, because I was sick and tired of sitting in the mosh pit and looking at all your asses all day. You don't understand how much that sucks after a while. But from the first time I did it, I was absolutely hooked. It's an incredible feeling sitting on top of that crowd in what I like to call the best seat in the house. And to be honest, it really is incredible. I think it's a really cool metaphor for people with disabilities as well. You know, what they can really do, getting out there and breaking the mould and doing what's unexpected of them. And on a side note, I've only fallen out once, and don't worry, I didn't get any more disabled from the fall, so it's all good. Now, when I reflect on my life, I think back to when, I'm really happy that I can sit here now and think that all this stuff almost didn't happen to me. I remember back when I was 14, I think of 14-year-old Dylan, and I think, you know, I had this really low expectations of myself of what I could achieve. And I let that dictate, you know, what I did in everyday life. I think back to 14-year-old Dylan, who thought of his disability as this really shitty burden that was really, really hard to overcome. I think back to 14-year-old Dylan, I think, man, I'm so lucky to be doing what I'm doing these days. I'm so glad that I could challenge my own perception about what I thought about disability. And to be honest, I can sit here in front of you all today and tell you 100% honest truth. If I ever had the chance to go back in time or eat some kind of magic pill and walk again, there's no way in hell you could ever pay me enough to do it. Because I absolutely love everything that's involved in my life, wheelchair or not, and I wouldn't change it for the world. But unfortunately, there are so many kids right across the world and all around Australia that are really struggling socially because of their disabilities. Disability remains this thing that nobody really wants to talk about. And there's still this negative stigma that having this disability is this weird, unlucky, really ugly thing. And for kids with disabilities that don't have any confidence, it's really, really hard for them to get over this and get into the world and do what they want to do. And it really restricts everything that they want to achieve. Now, there are heaps of problems in the world. Poverty, refugees, same-sex marriage, gender equality. They're all very, very important things. But when the hell do you ever hear anything about disability? Or when do you ever turn on the TV and see the first news story about somebody with a disability? Or when do you turn on your TV and see a wheelchair TV presenter? Sorry, a presenter in a wheelchair. Or somebody with cerebral palsy in our parliaments. Or an actual blind actor playing a blind actor, as opposed to some bloke who's just closing his eyes. Now, I remember when I was a kid, when I was struggling, when I was 14, I just wish I could have turned on my television and seen a guy in a wheelchair achieving. Because it would have made me realise that, you know what? I could do that too. That one day could be me. I wish I had a positive role model in the media where I could have seen somebody absolutely killing it. And that would have instilled the confidence in me to get out there and do whatever I want. I think it's really important moving forward that we as a society change our perception of disability away from this idea that it's this really bad, unlucky, weird thing, and stop being so scared to talk about it. We need to realise that it's okay to have any disability, and we need to further our expectations of what people with disabilities can really do. And moving forward, I think that in order to do that, we need a mainstream disability. Get people with disabilities into our mainstream media, and that will increase the visibility in a positive light. We need to make disability heaps more commonplace, and we need to start the conversation about it, which will go a long way in normalising it. And then, who knows, maybe one day if we can do that, these kids like me, like I used to be, won't be going through such a tough time. They won't be embarrassed about their disability ever again. And they'll have the confidence to go out there and do whatever they want. But as a society, we really have to hope that they pick a much better haircut than that. Thank you.
Okay, I'm not going to read these slides in their entirety to you, but for the next two slides, I'd like to point out some of the latest statistics related to ableism and individuals with diverse abilities. And I think it's important to understand that sometimes, because depending on where we are in our community, in our homes, in society, we may see a relatively low number of individuals compared to general population who may present outwardly with a diverse ability. What's important to understand, though, is diverse abilities are not always physical, right? They can present as cognitive as well. And so who we believe labels or we label as someone with a diverse ability, we may not even be sure, right? It's completely possible that as we move through life, the people that we shop with or sit in class with or worship with may have a diverse ability, simply it's not manifested in a physical form. And so it's important to understand that as well. But it's also important to understand on societal trend, where do we see the numbers impacting individuals who are discriminated against based on their ability? So an American community survey estimated that overall rate of people with disabilities in the United States was about 12.6% in 2015 of the total population. Okay, the percent of people with disabilities varies greatly by state, as do levels of people with disabilities in employment, poverty, earnings, and behaviors. So one quick thing I thought would be interesting to point out, the state with the lowest percentage of people with disabilities in 2015 was Utah. And at 9.9% of their total population, the state with the highest percentage of people with disabilities was actually West Virginia, with almost twice as high as a percentage of 19.4%. Okay. Now, one thing is, in 2015, the US population with disabilities, over half, 51.1%, were people of working ages between 18 and 64, while 41% were 65 and older. Disability in children and youth accounted for 7.2% and 0.4%. Now, this was statistically a nice way of tracking the percentage of individuals with disabilities as they move throughout their lifespan, right? So this is covering from under 5 years old all the way to 65, okay, and older. But what's important to also understand is, let's examine then where, depending on you are in your lifespan, if you were also possessing a diverse ability, right, how your lifespan might be impacted. 51.1%, all right, were working ages 18 to 64. Now, when we factor in, okay, that there is actually a gap of individuals who are employed at that age based off of their diverse ability and are actually paid less because of a diverse ability statistically, now we're seeing that's a huge impairment to one's lifespan development, right? This is impacting not only your self-esteem, but the money that you're able to make to care for yourself, as well as others, such as a family. Your ability to gain meaningful employment with all the opportunities financially that come with that are drastically impacted. Right, in 2015, 35% almost of people with disabilities in the US, right, from that 18 to 64 range, were employed, compared to 76% of people without disabilities. So if you have a disability in this age range in the same year, look at the difference here. Half half of a chance, right? Less than half a chance that you would be employed at the rate of someone who did not. The employment gap between those with a disability and those without has widened steadily over 8 years, right, from 38.8% to 41%. And employment rates vary by type of disability. So this is important to understand too. So employment rates are highest for people with hearing, okay, diverse abilities at 51%, vision at 41.8, the lowest, meaning the most difficult, or the individuals who will find employment most difficult, all right, have disabilities related to self-care at 15.6% and independent living skills at 16.4. Again, when someone is dependent upon employment for basic needs and survival, this is a huge, huge problem within our society regarding ableism. Okay, and for the final two slides of our lecture today, what I wanted to do was highlight, well, for part one of our lecture, is highlight some of the microaggressions. So if you remember back to our bullying, discrimination, and prejudice presentation lecture, right? We talked about microaggressions and we talked about macroaggressions too, right? The notion of when we discriminate and we say subtle things or take subtle action against individuals and groups that result in discriminatory acts through language and behavior towards a group. So I wanted to highlight what do some of those micro and macroaggressions look like to individuals with diverse abilities, right? Some of which Natty and Dylan discussed in their talks. Which I want to highlight here, right? So when we assume an individual's disability is a fluke or an embarrassment in their life, then we run the risk, very much so, of discriminating against that individual. We assume that that individual would want to, if they had the ability, live without that diverse ability. What we've learned in particular from the deaf community is that in particular, that notion of pity, an assumption that life is bad because of being deaf is a dangerous assumption. Individuals of the deaf community may sometimes express, no, they wouldn't trade their ability to hear for anything else. They believe that some individuals believe that the fact that they are deaf enriches their life and they are not in need of anyone's pity, nor their desire to change their circumstances. When we ask people what happened to you, or we say things like, I can never deal with that, and someone, sometimes we may be coming from an empathetic response. We may genuinely want to understand if this was due to an accident. Was someone born with a certain diverse ability? What happened, right? When we say that, though, what we're really saying to that individual is, I only see your diverse ability first. I don't see you as a person, as a student, as a colleague, as a researcher, right, as an athlete, whatever the case is. We're saying, I just see your diverse ability. And so that is where it can turn into a microaggression. Okay. When we say something like, I can never deal with that, that's can be hurtful to the individual who's hearing that, because they're saying, well, gosh, you could never deal with that. I mean, this is my everyday life, right? Am I a waste then if no one can deal with what I deal with? Do I contribute anything to our discussion, to society? Um, you know, I don't have a choice, right? This is my life and I have to deal with it because it's me, right? And so we have to be careful how we utilize that language. When we assume an individual is making it seem worse than their diverse ability is, maybe we think sometimes they're playing up their diverse ability. That can be really harmful, right? Because unless we've walked a mile in their shoes, unless we've spent a day navigating campus on crutches and or a wheelchair, whatever the case is, we wouldn't even begin to have an understanding after a full day of that what it means every day, right? To combat the challenges that society puts on us based on our diverse abilities. Imagine if we had a cognitive diverse ability. We weren't able to read at the same rate as other students. We digested information differently based on our needs. But we naturally assume that they're making it worse because maybe they're asking for extended deadlines or testing accommodations. Some individuals may jump right to, well, they just want it easier without understanding exactly how difficult it is, right? Expecting individuals with diverse abilities to catch up with the rest of the group is an unfair expectation placed on individuals who fundamentally may need certain accommodations provided to them to meet some of the challenges they're experiencing and to really provide an equitable opportunity to learn. Right. Here are some additional, excuse me, assumptions of where privilege comes forward within us as able-bodied individuals, right? So we think about the fact that we can easily arrange to be in the company of people with our physical ability, right? If we want to just hang out at Wanda's, if we want to take a stroll across campus, if we want to run into the James building and second floor and meet for a study group, can we do all of that without modifying our approach for someone? Well, that's an able-bodied thought, right? If I can get inside all buildings by using the main entrance, that's an able-bodied thought. I've never had to think about the entrance and whether I can overcome the way the entrance is designed, right? If I need to move, if I can easily be assured of purchasing housing, renting an apartment I can access to easily. Accessibility is one thing I did not need to make a special point of looking for. So think about that for individuals with, let's say, a diverse ability of requiring a wheelchair. If you want to go camping in or even stay at a cabin in the mountains, the next time if you ever find yourself in the mountains, look at the cabins that are there. See how many of them have ramps. Excuse me, for wheelchairs. See how many of them are accessible or safe even for an individual with a wheelchair to navigate, considering how steep some of the terrain is, right? This is something to consider that us as able-bodied individuals may not consider. I can be assured that my entire neighborhood will be accessible to me. Can I go for a walk? Can I get around? Can I navigate the streets? Is there enough shade if I wanted to stop and rest? Are the streets steep? Cracks in the ground, things to consider, right? I can assume that I can go shopping alone or that there will always have appropriate accommodations to make this experience hassle free. Can I reach everything on the shelves? Are there enough folks around to offer customer service if I needed assistance with something? These are all things to consider, right? And so often than not, we fail to see these gaps, right? Because again, remember, we needn't feel shameful because of our privilege, but we need to understand that our experience doesn't necessarily dictate the experiences of everyone around us. So, just a few thoughts related to macroaggressions, microaggressions, and privilege in regards to ableism. Okay, and last but certainly not least, what I'd like to do is go ahead and close out our time today with our centering exercise. And so let's spend these last 2 minutes, right, delving into our scripture verse for today, which comes from Exodus. Love this particular scripture verse. The Lord will fight for you. You have only to keep still, right? Um, we don't need to do anything extraordinary to seek God's love and protection, right? We only have to be still and recognize that He's there. And so our two words to focus our centering on today will be still, right? Be still. Allow the Lord to fight for you, right? Let's just be still and connect. And all of those other worries and concerns, they'll fall into place, right? So let's go ahead and make sure our hands and feet are in a nice, comfortable position. Let's go ahead and take that nice, deep breath and clear our mind and just draw into this be still, right? The Lord will fight for us. All we have to do is keep still. Go ahead and take that nice, deep breath and close your eyes, and I will keep track of the time. Okay, go ahead and take that nice deep breath. Welcome. Thank you for coming on back. Want to say thank you so much for tuning in today. I appreciate you all. Know that you are in my thoughts and prayers daily. If you need anything, all you've got to do is reach out and I'll connect with you. And please be sure to check Blackboard for your assignments and due dates so that you are all caught up on everything. Okay. Thank you all so much. Appreciate it. Look forward to part 2 of this lecture.